Hey everyone, my name is Ronak back with another episode. Welcome to the fifth episode of Let's Talk series. Today the guest of honor is Mr. Rishikesh Tavde. He is currently working for Ample Inc. as computer vision engineer. His area of expertise lies in the field of robotics with the computer vision and deep learning. Before joining Ample, he has worked at Rucha Engineers Private Limited as a robotics engineer in R&D section for over 2 years and 2 months. He has also been a research intern at Bhabha Atomic Research Center in his undergrad. He holds a master's degree in robotics from University of Maryland and bachelor's degree in electronics engineering from Sardar Patel Institute of Technology. So this podcast is not only available on the YouTube but also in the audio formats on Spotify and Anchor. Links to those will be down in the description box. There are also timestamps available for the YouTube video in the description box as well. If you like my content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow my podcast on Spotify. So let us now get started with the podcast. Hope you'll enjoy it. So hey Rishikesh, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing completely fine. Yeah, so now I have a set of generic questions for you, so which are completely related to where you work, etc. So
Mhm.
let us start with our first question. So this question I tend to ask everyone is where you work currently and what is your designation?
Okay. I currently work at a startup which is Ample Inc. And I work as there as a computer vision software engineer. So
Mhm.
to tell more about Ample is basically we are disrupting the electric charging space. So what we have brought new to the industry is basically we do battery swapping. So instead of like a car going to a charging station, waiting there for half an hour, 1 hour, we basically what we do is like we can swap our batteries in 10 minutes, have bringing battery charging as convenient, as easy, and as quick as gas. So that's what Ample does. What I do in Ample is like to swap these batteries you require robots, and
Hmm.
basically when robots come into picture you really need it to detect stuff like perception. So detecting these battery modules which we swap. So I do that job on like helping robots to detect those battery modules, locating where it is in the camera space, and then commanding other robots to go there and pick it up. So
Hmm.
that's what I do. So that's the computer vision part. Apart from there is always general software development, which I help the company.
Hmm. So are these batteries like decomposable? Like you just use them once and throw them?
No. It's not like that. It's basic the same. So it's basically the big battery which an electric vehicle has. We have divided it into sub models. Like it's just small chunks of the same cube. Okay, small cubes. What it helps us and end up doing is basically we don't need like big machineries. Like the previous battery swapping startups, what they have done is like they have one huge battery. They bring some big robots. They pull that battery out and they pull an entire big battery in. So that ends up increasing your electricity, having big construction cost, and that's why the return on investment and the return on investment was pretty low,
Hmm.
because there is a lot of investment needs to be done in order to make the same setup. Okay, so what
Hmm.
we instead of end up doing is basically and that entire technology wasn't scalable. So what we ended up doing, we divided the same battery into small modules. Now the storage, now it can be, now you don't need any underground construction for it. And secondly, it's extremely scalable. You can make up, we also make adapter plates. So what happens is these batteries, they go into a kind of a plate like structure, and that plate is mounted onto the car.
Hmm.
Even if your car changes your and even if your adapter plate changes, the battery modules remain the same. And
Hmm.
that's what we are swapping actually.
Hmm.
So that gives an edge. You can easily scale across different cars. You can easily scale. So that was what previous startups were not able to do, and that's what we bring. That modularity is what we bring new into the picture. And it's not decompose, coming to a point, that's not use and throw kind of thing. It basically goes into the pod where it charges over time,
Hmm.
and then whenever a new car comes up, we remove its uncharged batteries and put new batteries, and in pod it keeps on charging.
Yeah, so your goal is to save the time as much as you can. Like you will be
Yeah,
charging
so
later on.
yeah, I'll be
Hmm.
charging later. Yeah. So
Hmm.
when the car comes, it will always have some fixed set of batteries which will be charged fully. So it doesn't put lot of pressure on the grid that we need like extremely high current to charge the battery. It can happen at its own pace, and even the customer gets a quick swap, 10 minutes.
Great idea. And now let me talk about little about your robotics background itself. So, how you were able to develop an interest in this area? Like, where was the moment it spurted?
Oh, so I think robotics is very easily to be fascinated when you're a child. I think got fascinated when I think it could be Transformers. Looking like as a kid, looking Transformers cartoon. I don't really know like where it exactly spurted, but what I liked about robotics when I grew up is basically, first of all, I was always fascinated to the idea as a child, and then when I grew up I liked robotics as a challenge, because basically robotics is a multi-domain field. It has mechanical, it has electrical involved in it, it has computer science involved in it. So basically when you are working as a roboticist, you have to deal with all three problems. It's not like you end up design robotics from scratch, but whatever challenges you face from a robot, it will be always like a multi-domain problem. It's not like it's like this is a computer science problem, this is an electrical one. No, it's always a multi-domain problem to begin with. You develop it, and then you have like three different domain challenges to solve it. So that's what I like about robotics. You end up doing multiple things in the field, and it basically feels amazing when you see a robot moving, or like you and does things autonomously. It's such a like cool thing to watch. So I think that's what kept me motivated and keeps me going into this field.
And now, you explained the idea about what you are working on currently in the startup itself. But let me ask you about from your point of view. So you have been working in the robotics domain for a long period of time, I would say. So where do you even feel that the robotics are brought into the commercial practices? So apart from your current working domain, where do you feel that robotics is actually brought into practice, into the commercial area?
Oh, so actually, in practice, you see robots being used majorly. So we have seen robotic arms being used majorly in like robot welding. Like, so there is spot welding, there is arc welding where robots are used, and that's what the major sector in India, China is like. They use lots of robotic arms in this field, and the second major sector is and it's so this is one sector like manufacturing, painting, and then there is a second sector which is like equally important, which is warehouse. Okay, and there are like two different cases of robots here. So usually when you talk about manufacturing robots, you talk about robotic arms. So you have a different set of players completely. You have ABB, you have KUKA, you have Yaskawa, and you have like Fanuc there. So this is a completely different set of industries, extremely developed with robotic arms. They have all set of like their automation tools and everything in this field. And you basically you can make the robot do arc welding. There is spot welding, there is painting, there is assembly, there is cutting, grinding, everything. So that's a whole set of thing. Then there is warehouse robots where it's not just a robotic arm, it's basically a mobile robot. So so it came from an idea where a person is just standing at one place, and if he wants to pack a bag, it's all that material which he needs into one place. So you have all the robots, so Amazon, Flipkart, and all Alibaba. So all this use this mobile robots for. So basically it brings all the item we need for that particular package to the person, and you just pick it from a shelf and you put it in a box and pack it. So that's how simple it is. And so you have a completely different set of players in that industry. Like you have Fetch Robotics, you have Kiva Systems, which was then acquired by Amazon. So you have all these players, and it takes a completely different set of technologies to make that work. So these are the two major sectors. Apart from that, we have always seen like robots in space exploration. We recently saw Perseverance landing on Mars. We had
Exactly. Yes.
previous robots. We have I think Robonaut in which works at NASA's at international space centers. So this is where it goes into space and everything. Apart from that, I've also seen people using robots in medical fields. So
Hmm.
medical and agricultural fields are basically these two fields which are have a market for robots, but it's not today, I would say. In medical robots, I've seen people using robots, but they are not autonomous, controlled by human itself, and it gives, and I think it gives the human person a kind of precision which it requires, but it's still
Hmm.
human control, but it's still a robot. Okay. And in an agriculture field, there is a demand for robots is because in countries like US, even in Europe, India, where they have huge acres of lands. In that
Hmm.
cases, if you want to make it efficient, like your anything efficient, you basically need robots. So they are used in harvesting. So one
Wow.
application is harvesting. You have like multiple startups working in it. You have like Abundant Robotics. You have, like, I think Harvest Robotics, Blue River Tech companies. So all
Hmm.
this all these startups, they basically work on, like, they detect whether a fruit is ripe or not, and if it's right, it plucks it. So that's a
Hmm.
simple example. Then you have other kind of startups working in this field. You have drones. Okay. So that drone lives on your field, and you tell it to scan your entire field. It goes to multiple spaces, takes some video samples, analyzes the soil and everything, and gives
Hmm.
you instant data. So this is the data of your soil. This is what your fertility is. This is what you can do with it. It can also be used as something which you can monitor the entire farm with, since it's like
Hmm.
running across huge acres. So this is where it's being used in the agricultural field, and using it as a service. So I
Hmm.
see like these four sectors basically: manufacturing, then as a warehouse. This is where major players are. Apart from that, agriculture and medical is what is coming up, and space exploration is something which has it always been used, and defense too.
Hmm.
Yeah. Defense and space exploration are where we like see all the fancy stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's quite a massive scope, I would say.
Yeah,
There
it's
is
pretty
scope.
massive. Yeah.
Hmm. So I'm not acquainted with the concept of the robotics. Like I had some sort of fascination towards it, but
Mm.
I have been very closely related to the IoT area. So I would like to ask you that is IoT
Mm.
any associated with the work you do, or any other people are contributing to your work from
Yeah,
IoT
so
background?
IoT is take a device. You can operate it via internet. You can monitor it via and
Hmm.
analyze stuff. Okay. So yes, we do that. So basically, since we so to give you an example, we have this swapping stations. Okay, you deploy it in a pod. Now,
Hmm.
how does someone sitting at our office knows like what's going on? How do you get the health statistics of that swapping station and everything? That's basically where IoT comes into picture. So the kind of analysis which we want to know is like, whether is the pod okay? Does it require servicing? What kind of system is affected right now,
Hmm.
if there is a problem? And also like, how what are the since we are majorly into giving swapping fast, one analytics which is important to us is, hey, what is the most time consuming process in my swapping? So in
Hmm.
this in an analysis like this, you require something like IoT in picture, where we basically monitor systems. We send the data over cloud, and then we analyze it. But
Hmm.
it's not something like traditional IoT, which people feel like. So since you can't operate everything via internet, or you can't get data for every sensor, but like it's basic. So the granularity is not extremely minute. On a process level, we do an IoT application, you can say.
Hmm.
And it's extremely used in engineers and business analytic people use only of the company. So it's not something we are giving it to customer. It's basically something we use inside the company to get our own
Hmm.
analysis and operating it.
Yeah. So.
And I think in
Hmm.
robotics overall, like IoT is used because since robots are deployed on the field, you need stuff to do with the robot over the internet. So yeah, so IoT and I think robotics goes hand in hand.
Hmm. I see. And now I would like to have your word on ROS. Okay, so that is robotic OS.
Mm. Mm.
So where was the first time you encountered it, and how you went on learning it?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. So ROS basically, yeah, as you call it, robot operating system. Really encountered it, and when I was in my, I think, third year of my engineering, I
Mm-hmm.
was looking for internship opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I started. Also, since I always had a plan where that I want to go for masters in US, I always was looking at international universities for giving me internship opportunities. So that's where I came across a CMU course called as Masters in. They had an internship, summer internship opportunity where they required ROS.
Mm-hmm.
That students coming in should require ROS. So I had no clue what ROS was till then, and then I started researching about it, and then I felt like it's pretty cool. ROS started as is basic is so Stanford University had a small prototype like ROS. So let me tell you first what ROS is. ROS is basically a meta operating system. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not an operating system like its only an operating system which works on any other operating system like Debian or
Mm-hmm.
any other thing. Okay, so it works on that, and it provides you a framework wherein suppose one university is extremely good at suppose perception. Okay, it's extremely good at computer vision, and there is another university which is basically good at might be finding might be in controls. Okay, in controls, moving a robotic arm and something, and there is one university which is extremely good at identifying objects. Then how does this two universities now? Initially, what used to happen prior to ROS is like every university used to have their some own system of robotics. Okay, and they used to develop in that. Now one you can take like one piece of uh, research from established code from one university and can use it for another. So there was a
Mm-hmm.
missing gap here. And Stanford was developing robots for its own in its own lab. It was called, I think, the STARE program, Stanford AI robots and personal robots. So it was developing. It had a system where it could use multiple code. It had a framework where it was using for its robots, and basically Willow Garage is a private company who was incubating at that point of time at Stanford. Identified, yeah, this is something which is good, and that it got it to something which we call production level. Not exactly production level, but tested it pretty robustly, and then it
Mm-hmm.
got to a level, and that's where it got picked up by other universities since it was open source, and everybody could like contribute it back to could contribute to the community through ROS.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what ROS does is, so at this point of time, like today, ROS acts as a meta operating system, which really gives you all the tools you need for rapid development of any kind of robot. So to give you an example, ROS. So on a higher level, what you require for a robot to operate is first is perception. Then you need controls. You need
Mm-hmm.
navigation, and you need localization. So you need what the robot is seeing. You need to know where the robot is. You need to navigate
Mm-hmm.
from point A to B, and then you need to have some kind of intelligence. You need to interact, so you need controls and intelligence. So all these topics are itself major research areas in their own. So
Mm-hmm.
what people universities do, they create, they when they do research, they create their own software, what you can repository, and they push it on maybe ROS. Okay, so now for a person like me in industry sitting, when I'm developing my robot, I basically download this framework, and now I have access to this tons of research which people have done all over the years, and then I can choose, and then I can implement. Then it has, and the way it works is like it has independent systems running. So even if like one system gets down, the other
Mm-hmm.
systems doesn't get affected. So
Mm.
if perception node is down, it doesn't mean like the robot can't walk now. Making sense?
Oh,
So
yes, 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 yes.
that is the ideology in which it is developed, which is extremely specific to robots, and
Mm.
that's what make it extremely amazing. It's compatible across cross languages, cross platforms. So that is what ROS brings into the picture, is be a common platform where you can unify the research which is going on to robotics, easy accessible tools for developing various for implementing various algorithms. And third thing which it does is the sensors like lidars, cameras, and everything, all most of the sensors, they all have ROS supports, so that you
Mm.
can easily, you just plug and you run a ROS node, and you start getting data from these sensors. So you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
like sit and write might be an algorithm to read this data. ROS does it for you. So
Mm.
all these things, small things which you require for fast prototyping, for development, which are extremely robot specific, that's what you get from Ross, basically, I would say.
So, speaking of Ross, so you said that you actually were learning it for an opportunity of getting an internship.
Yeah.
So, pertaining to the same question itself, so you were lucky enough, I would say fortunate enough to get an internship into the BARC. So,
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, the kind of the experience you had over there. So, working as an intern in the BARC itself.
Yeah. So I think BRC. So basically, I said, like, in the third year of my internship, I was looking for internship opportunities, and that's where I basically came across the BRC internship opportunity. I think my work at BRC has been my first industrial experience, and that's why it's extremely special. And I think it was really good for me.
Mm-hmm.
So BRC basically has a department called as a division of robotics and remote handling. So it's called
Mm.
DRHR. Okay, and that what it does is develops all kinds of robots which BRC requires. So it could be a robot which could be mapping radiation, or it could be a
Mm.
robot which could, like, be removing that thorium rods. Okay,
Oh.
so all this technology which we use in this nuclear reactors, they basically BRC developed it for.
Mm.
Okay, so what they were doing is like, when I joined, they were developing a robot which could do this radiation mapping, and they were using some proprietary software, like,
Mm.
as I said, like Willow Garage. So Willow Garage is a company which basically had a PR2 robot. So before Ross, people were using PR2 and its software, and then
Mm.
Ross started coming in. So even BRC did the same thing. BRC used this proprietary software, and now no one has support for this proprietary software, and everybody in the world is using Ross. That's the project I got, basically. You have this
Mm.
robot, we have developed it to this level. Now what you do is convert functional on Ross. So that was my
Mm.
first task. So I took, like, that's where I started, like, learning more in depth of Ross, and I got to know how that framework works. And then I did that, and then after that, the second job was to make that robot localization. So it was a localization problem. It had a lidar on it. Okay, and basically what I wanted to do is, like, if it's in a space, tell me where it is, what, and so that I can make it move to point B. So it was
Mm.
that was my overall project at BRC. It was pretty fascinating, and there are, like, lots of smart people working in in overall BRC. I would say if
Mm.
anybody gets an opportunity, I would say it's one of the best institutes to work with, and it changed my perception. Like, usually when you think of a government institute, you think, like, I always had a perception, like, it would be something uninteresting. It would be some outdated technology they would be
Mm.
working with, and pretty slow job. I that changed my like, I think DRHR changed my I think BRC changed my perception. They have some pretty cool, pretty smart scientists who know about what is going on in the world, and are also motivated enough to make it
Mm.
implement here in India. So yeah,
Mm.
so it was pretty cool. BRC and DRHR, everything.
Great, great. Like getting that opportunity itself is difficult, I would say. Like
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
never fortunate to get one. It is very
So
difficult.
it's I would say it's not about more about being fortunate. I think BRC is extremely, what you can say, since it's a department of defense research, it can't just take people in, you know.
Mm.
It makes sense, right? Since it's a defense institute, so basically you need someone from BRC telling that, okay, I know this guy, if anything happens, it's my responsibility. So I
Oh.
was fortunate enough to have a person like that in BRC for who could be telling me. And then
Mm.
once you have a person like that, a job doing a BRC internship is not that difficult. But what
Oh,
I would say I was lucky is, like, usually in Mumbai inner city you have only 1 month internship.
exactly.
Okay, you usually have 1 month internship. But what I did is, like, I went to my HOD and I said, like, no, this 1 month internship is, I'm not gonna learn anything. Can you extend it for 2 months? So
Mm.
once I, like, had it for a 2 month internship, that's when I could do project like this. Otherwise, like, in a 1 month internship, basically learning a new technology, learning what
Mm.
kind of thing, what thing they have developed. So
Mm.
that's where we need, if you're going in institute like this and you want to work really good, go for a bigger time span. That's when you get really good projects to work in, and that's something which it could help you over a career, actually.
Mm. Yeah, now the next question is, so you said your college was quite helping you to get the internship and all. So
Yeah.
how do you would say that your college has been helpful in order to provide you with some great projects in your undergrad, so which are aiding your work at the moment? So
Oh,
any
okay.
projects
So
that you have worked which are very very cool and which have
mm,
actually helped you build your resume. So any one of those projects.
so majorly like so my B project, which was we used to call it water, and what we did is like we made a tool which could you could take to a lake or a river, and
Mm.
you could dip into it, and you basically say what is the quality of water. Okay,
Mm.
so we did this simple thing, but we had pretty so I think this was a project which we needed our department support, and we were pretty fortunate enough that we had a HOD which was extremely supportive, and since what happens is like the sensors which we need, so we needed sensors which could measure oxygen level in the water. We needed sensors which could like what is the nitrous content, what is maybe so we had different sensors which could pH level of a pH level of water. So we had sensors which could measure like 5 different qualities of water,
Mhm.
and our department supported it to like funded it so that we can
Mm.
acquire those sensors. Okay, and once we acquired those sensors, what we did is basically made a mechanical jig which you could attach these sensors in, and we had 2 different parts to this. One is which could auto so we so since I was a robotics person, I basically made an autonomous board which could
Mhm.
sorry, not exactly autonomous boat, a semi-autonomous boat. We could send it to a lake and it could fetch you 6 beakers of water sample.
Mm.
That was what my contribution to that project is like you a remote control boat, you can send over it. It basically automatically fetches water from different samples levels wherever you take it,
Mhm.
and then you bring it to a station. Then basically made a jig in which you can place this beaker, and then my friends did develop the signal processing side of that sensors, and you
Oh.
basically dip one sensor one by one and you record it. And then we had a third set of project, so it was and we have a third set of part of the system wherein
Mm.
you basically take this sample, you put it on a petri dish. Okay, and you
Okay.
put it under a camera, some kind of chemical, and then you see some kind of microbe, bacterial growth in that water, and you
Oh.
put it under a camera, and the camera captures that image and it basically tells you how many bacteria are there in
Oh.
from the growth which it is. So there were like
Great.
3 different parts to this project, and
Mm.
every system was handled by 2 people. There's 3 different processes. Since it was a pretty huge project, it was spanning over multiple disciplines. We needed a
Mm.
support from our HOD and from the and funding too. At the end of the day, we created a system which you bring 6 beaker samples. It takes samples from each and every one. It could tell you like what exactly its quality is and is it beneficial for drinking. So this is
Mm.
something which I basically first of all, one thing which is good about this project is what I could build it from scratch, and it had a real world application. So it was pretty
Mm.
fascinating to me, and this is something I think it helped me to not it helped me to get my job after my graduation and
Oh.
also in my master's program.
Mm.
So this is one project, and second thing is I'm not sure if you know about Robocon. Robocon
Mm.
is a competition which is held like all over the world. It basically
Yes,
has a
yes.
new theme every year, and you
Mhm.
have to make robots for it. I did that for like 3 years of my undergrad. I got to build like 2 robots every year. So that was
Mm.
one thing, and then you had a B project like this. So I think that could sum up like all these projects like actually helped me to get my job and everything
Mm.
after.
Yeah, so actually, I would like to say that EXTC can be, very, very much fascinating because I was from IT background, and the best that I personally have created is a line follower,
Oh, okay.
nothing more than that. So,
Okay.
like, these are, I would say, a kind of real robotic application, robotics
Yeah.
applied projects, I would say, in
Yeah. Yeah.
particular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, coming back to US, so I would like to ask one of your great experiences that you had at the University of the Maryland.
I think it's like having one great experience for to summarize this 2 years is extremely difficult because I think Maryland, what Maryland gave me is like a lot of practical experience,
Mhm.
and I would say like familiarity with new technology. Um, some of the few experiences to tell you about, like the kind of projects we did. It's extremely at Maryland. The course way it was designed, it was extremely industry oriented, and it was extremely
Mhm.
project oriented. So like there was a semester where I did like 11 projects in just like 6 months. And like
Oh,
every week I had like, so if I take a perception course, it was like it's every week we had one project, every week one project
my
and
God.
it was not something like is childish, but it was something like which had a which could actually help you in industry. So to give you a few
Oh.
example, we took a self-driving car video, found out lanes on it. So it was a
Mhm.
lane detection from a live from actual highway footage. So detecting that lane and basically telling like what kind of radius, where the lane is and what kind of turning radius it should. The first ever project which I did in my perception course was that guy. He just went into a room. There were some QR tags he placed there, and
Mm.
he gave us the most noisiest video possible,
Oh.
noisiest video from an outdated phone. And it tell us, now what you take this video, you detect this AR tags in it,
Mm.
and you put an image on it, and it
Oh.
should rotate the same way, and that image should rotate the same way with the tag. So
Oh.
it's basically an application of augmented reality in the
Mm.
noisiest possible video possible. So there were like projects like this which actually I would say helped me in my real world application where the data is extremely noisy. Also taught me some the kind of tools which I use, like OpenCV, PCL, and everything.
Mm.
So that, and then I also had so basically the way I did my study was I did computer vision and I did deep learning. So I
Mm.
took this a balance of these two courses. And deep learning, we had like really good faculties at Maryland, which there were courses where you have to just read research papers, and you read research papers, you tell the class what you got to know. And you
Mm.
basically, that's how I built my understanding about what is. And we basically read research papers right from like 1990s to
Mm.
2016,
Oh.
and major topics. So that gave me a whole breadth. So it's not to get depth, but like to get a breadth across how is this field developed, why are we
Mm.
using these technologies, where
Mhm.
are these technologies going. So that
Mm.
is, and that basically tells you like this is the all the fields which you can work as a computer vision engineer. Now
Mm.
pick up a thing which you interest more and you can go into that. So that was some, I would say, some key moments, or you can say key points, which actually key milestones in my academic journey at Maryland, which actually
Mhm.
got me to a position where I could like work in a field, work at a company and do well.
And now you talked about that you took the courses of the deep learning and the computer vision itself. So now I would like to have a word on both of those from you. So, what
Okay.
was the best thing that you came across with the deep learning and also in the computer vision? And do you, I am completely aware that computer vision you even use in your work area right now. But now let us talk
Yeah.
a little bit about the deep learning. So, do you use it in your work area?
So I currently do not actively use deep learning, but we had a project where we used to use deep learning.
Mm-hmm.
So we use deep learning for detecting images. So
Mm.
it was detecting glass. So suppose a car comes in, and you want to know where the car is, you need basically need detection algorithm. So we had to collect data, label it, and then train a neural network in order to detect that. So
Mm.
that was this kind of a scope where we used in our work, where we used a deep learning model to do something. Apart from that, since then we shifted to what you can say a point cloud data, which is basically a 3D data. And
Mm.
deep learning models on that are still under research, I would say. So there are
Yes.
models like PointNet. There are
Mm.
models like PointNet, PointNet plus plus, which are doing extremely great job in, like, basically if you have a model, You know, like a 3D chair looks like this. Some
Yes.
modern 3D chair look like this. Point cloud data, and we pass in and you say where that this chair is. It basically detects, but it's not that pretty accurate, since the accuracy which we require is in MMs. Usually
Hmm.
neural networks are basically good as far as like for detecting stuff or classifying, for telling like there is something like this in this area. But where
Hmm.
extreme precision comes in, that's why we rely on like traditional computer vision algorithms, where
Hmm.
we can use exact filters and geometry. So what I do is majorly implementing geometry via computer vision, so that basically I
Oh.
could get extreme precise localizations or extremely precise
Hmm.
detections. So that's why we are not going for deep learning models. It's not something that deep learning models can do, but it's something like deep learning models are not capable of right now. They can
Oh.
do it in
Oh.
future, but they are not
Yes.
as far as 3D data is concerned. So when we were using point cloud data, so when we're using the deep learning models in images, um, one of the most difficult problems to face is like lighting. It's like
Hmm.
lighting is never even across, and that is why many computer vision algorithms struggle. At least I would say traditional algorithms, but
Hmm.
that is something neural networks tend to pretty handle. They do struggle, but still they do a pretty good job as compared to traditional ones.
Hmm.
So yeah, and we had to create all. I know my senior. So since we are a pretty small team, I still know my senior. Like he used to go to different cars on the road, take images of the tires. We were detecting tires,
Hmm.
so detecting tires, labeling it, and then running a neural network on it, finally
Oh.
training and so yeah, it was pretty fascinating of a task for him. And
Hmm.
we used it for like couple of years, and then after we moved to a different technology, and now we don't use
Hmm. So after deep learning, so now I would like to have a uh, word of you on the importance of the computer vision. So you said that you
it.
have been prominently working in the area of the computer vision. So now, so let us talk about how you went on implementing it and what is the importance of it. Not, I would say, in the generic terminologies that you currently work on, but
Mm.
on the overall EXTC background. Okay, so you have been an electronics engineer, electronics and
Okay.
telecommunication, I guess. Yeah. So how you think computer vision is important? Let us just assume the demography of India itself. So in India,
Okay.
how would you say that computer vision plays an important role?
Okay. So computer vision is at the basic. It's basically making sense of an image.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, it's basically you're making sense of an image or a video or a data, cloud data. So
Hmm.
that is basically computer vision. Okay. So if you want to know like more of an application point of view, is like where in India we can use computer vision and how good can its application could be. I would say I think the most common and um, known application of computer vision is your face recognition. You
Hmm.
open your phone and zap, your phone
Hmm.
unlocks by just looking at your face. I think that is the most simplest of all computer vision applications and most widely adopted. In a country
Hmm.
like India, I think a country like India can basic benefit a lot. We can have something like Face ID, like the one which like China has. Is like
Hmm.
you a person comes in, you track a person by his face, and you can then use that data for all kind of stuff. You basically know who is a person who violated, suppose you had a person who did some crime. You basically have a
Hmm.
camera which now is a database of detecting faces. You now know like, yeah, this is the person who did a camera. Or like from so this is where it gets like, this is where it gets like face recognition getting used for a face ID. So you go to a shop, you basically show your face, and it already has a bank accounts linked to it. They, yeah, paid. Whatever you take,
Hmm.
it's paid. But this is something extremely fancy, something which we can use for, suppose for garbage segregation.
Hmm.
Okay, so you have
Hmm.
you have you basically look at like, is this what is this, is it a coke bottle, is it a can, is it some kind of, it looks like a dry sewage, is it a wet sewage. So using a camera for segregation
Hmm.
and using robots with it, I think it's really, it's being used, but it's not, but I think it's not, computer vision is not used that aggressively in this domain. But this is something which because in India we create, like, since we have this big of a population, we
Hmm.
create so many waste, so much waste. In that case, segregating waste of so many people could be extremely easy if we have computer vision deployed there, which could tell this is a dry waste. It's okay. This is a wet waste here. Remove.
Mm.
So this is where one application where computer vision can be used. I also know some of the startups in India which are, we have cases like floods. We
Yes.
have Chennai floods always. We had floods. We even had so whenever the earthquakes, a lot of earthquakes. So whenever there is disasters, I know a company which basically has drones, which
Mm.
you can hover over an area, and you identify people in that debris.
Oh.
Because what happens is like, so you identify people in that debris, and you basically tell there is a person here. Or you can be manual or quad rotor inside the debris, and you
Mm.
basically start detecting stuff. So this is a third example in disaster relief or management, where
Mm.
India could benefit, and India is actually benefiting from it. There are many startups working in this domain. So these are, I think, I would say, broad domains which you can implement computer vision, and I think it would have like great impact, I would say.
Mm. Nice. Yeah. So now this is the last question. Okay. So I would
Yeah.
like to have a message that you would like to give to all of the aspiring computer vision engineer, or let us say who are from an electronics background, but
Okay.
dream big to get into any of the application areas of the computers or robotics, or the
Okay.
areas that you have been working in from your graduation itself. So a word
Okay.
on it.
So I would say one thing which helped me, and I would obviously give you to my fellow juniors coming in, is like, uh, I guess something which helped me is working for robotic competitions, or like
Hmm.
working for any kind of competition. Like we have Tech Fest in Mumbai, which is
Hmm.
a huge event. I would say like, instead of like doing a project just for a course level, if you do a course, if you do like take part in this competitions like RoboWars, we have line falling. It could be
Hmm.
just a simple application, but you learn so many different stuff which you don't buy, which it's impossible to run during your course. So just
Hmm.
to give you a line following robot example, once you basically know how to assemble stuff, how to
Yes.
how to make a robot. Basically, you learn how to operate motors, how you learn how to control a motor, you learn how PID works, like a
Hmm.
simple proportional integration derivative controller. And then you know like what kind of LEDs are there in the market, what threshold you need to cut off, how they work. So you work with sensors, you work with controls, you work with the mechanical assembly. If you
Hmm.
have experience with these three and controls algorithm, I think that's where you got your first thing. It doesn't needs to be a camera. It
Okay.
doesn't needs to be a camera, but like that's where you got your first line follower, and you had a sensor where when you send something. Okay,
Hmm.
so when you work in these competitions like this, go for robotics competitions, which TechFest has, which any kind of which has a theme where you can like where you can show your robotic expertise, or where you can where there is something to detect. Okay, so for example, if for giving you an example, instead now you made your first line follow robot, now make
Yes.
it with the camera.
Yeah.
Simple.
Hmm. So
Okay,
improvements in
instead, yeah,
all
so
the
just
sections.
improve it. Yeah, just improve it and put up a camera, and
Hmm.
once you detect it, I would say like that's your first project into computer vision. As
Oh.
simple as that. Okay,
Hmm.
or you don't even need a robotic setup. You basically have a webcam of your laptop, and there are so many tools available online. Like you have OpenCV. You have
Yes.
OpenCV is a huge user friendly tool. There are a lot many tutorials on it. So
Hmm.
just do there are a lot many face recognition algorithms on it. Don't just so computer vision is not about just using a tool, but also knowing like how it works in the background, so that whenever
Oh.
something breaks, you know what's going wrong. Okay,
Hmm.
so always don't just like, so if you know like a couple of libraries to install and a couple of code lines to run, anybody can do that. But
Yes.
understanding how the theory works, how why is this algorithm giving me face, why is not giving me anything, why is not detecting anything else. Okay,
Hmm.
why is it, why do I need it to train which this, what if I don't have the data. So
Hmm.
you know like, I take this data, I use this algorithm, and it gives me this output. But what if I don't have the data? Now
Oh.
what you do? So that's where
Mm.
your theory comes in.
Yes.
That's where theory helps you. That's not, the library is not going to tell you what you need to do, right? The code is something
Exactly.
you write. The library is not going to tell you. That is something where theory comes in. So always learn your computer vision theory. So that there are a lot many online resources. You have courses on Coursera. There is Udacity courses which offer a lot many. So that this is where you can learn basics of computer vision. And once you gain this, you basically go and, I would say, try to solve. And Kaggle is one of the websites which has like lot many neural network and deep learning data sets. So if you
Yes.
want to go into computer vision, pick something, simply pick some image based database and try to solve a problem. The more problems you try to solve, I would say, the more better computer vision engineer you can get, or any kind of engineer for that matter. And I would say, like, once you have and get, and always keep, and since computer vision and deep learning overall is a growing field, it's you growing at immense, like extremely fast, like every year there is something new. Keep updated with, read your Medium articles, read Reddit, go on, like there are like a bunch of KD Nuggets. There's another website.
Yes.
So subscribe to this email services, which basically gives you like this is happening in the industry, this is something new, this is something X person discovered. So it's always, and also like go, and it could be as simple as like go into your Google News and update what you are interested in. So tell like you're interested in robotics, tell you're in computer vision, so that it gives you news feeds based on that. So it could be as simple as that, and to be updated with the industry. And this is something which you, if you do like, if you do like as a fresher, I would say, when you, by the time you join industry, would be something which would be really immensely knowledge, and know what you're, and having a good skill set. So I would say this is what you can do.
Yeah, so it was a great session, and Rishi, I would really like to thank you for devoting your time, because our time spans aren't matching. So okay, so here it is night, there it is morning, but and you definitely took out time out of your schedule to conduct this podcast. I'm really thankful for that, and I would also like to thank your brother, especially, who helped us as who actually helped us establishing the contact itself, because it was like, I think, 12 or 13 years that we weren't in touch, and your brother helped us. So that was really, really great. So even I would like to thank your brother. Yeah, so it was definitely a great session. So I would really like to thank you for that.
I would like to thank you for like giving me this opportunity to share my experiences through your podcast. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this wonderful podcast service, wonderful podcast and video services which are running.
Yes. Yeah, so a word for audience. So what I'll do is I'll link Rishikesh's LinkedIn profile in the description box. Apart from that, you will also have the timestamps of the video. And if you like to listen to the audio versions of this, the links to the Spotify and Anchor will be also in the description box itself. So that was the today's session. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.